cannot successfully investigate and prosecute real crime when they lose the trust of entire segments of the community. And that's why so many local and state law enforcement officers don't want to have this collaboration forced on them. They want to actually protect communities. We already knew that Trump's goal is not to target the, quote, worst of the worst. More than 70% of the people in immigration today, as a result of his mass detention and deportation campaign, have absolutely no criminal record. And of the remaining 27%, most have only been convicted of a minor traffic offense. He simply wants to demonize immigrants and go after our friends, our neighbors, and our coworkers. And now the administration is forcing our state and local law enforcement to pick up the slack for his ICE and Border Patrol, even as more examples emerge every day of immigration agents harassing and arresting U.S. citizens. Our legislation will repeal the provision that allows for this program. It will keep local police out of immigration enforcement, ensuring that local law enforcement can restore trust with our communities they serve. And overall, it will make all of our communities safer. This is a common sense bill to protect public safety, to protect our communities, to protect all of us. So I thank my colleagues again for their important work on this legislation, and I'm now happy to introduce the wonderful Congresswoman from the state of Delaware, Congresswoman Sarah McBride.
Thank you so much, Representative Jayapal, Representative Quigley, Representative Fushi, and the advocates who are here today. Good morning, everyone. My colleagues and I stand to highlight the critical reintroduction of the Protect Immigration Act. I stand here on behalf of not just my neighbors, but everyone who is feeling the weight of this moment. Over the last 11 months, my constituents have expressed to me their deep fears and their profound uncertainty. Because right now, our immigration system is being weaponized against our friends and our neighbors. Their voices may not always make headlines, but their pain is visible across our country. From Delaware to Louisiana, Chicago to Charlotte, people are living in fear to go to work, to go to a doctor's appointment, or to visit a loved one. And they are living with the consequences of congressional inaction. By removing the potential for deputization, the Protect Immigration Act would ensure that law enforcement is focused on their top priority, to protect and defend every individual in our communities, to be trusted local partners to their local communities to keep those communities safe. Across this country, indiscriminate immigration enforcement is harming U.S. citizens, lawful residents, and children. We are seeing countless due process failures and use of force that flies in the face of precedent and defies federal standings. Unmarked and untrained ICE agents are detaining people without cause and defying court orders. This lawless behavior cannot continue to go unchecked by Congress. Diverting local authorities distracts from the important work of law enforcement, and it runs the risk of politicizing law enforcement by ensnaring them into an effort to undermine the crown jewel of the rule of law, due process. And we should be clear, it would be naive to believe that such disregard for due process would end with immigrants. This oversight is not optional, it is our duty. I'm proud to support this legislation, to stand here with my colleagues, and I'm hopeful that working together we can restore dignity and humanity to a process that has become far too cruel. And with that, I'd like to introduce Representative Valerie Fushi from the great state of North Carolina.
Thank you, Representative McBride, and thank you all for being with us here today. I am happy to be here with my colleagues to introduce this important legislation. In my home state of North Carolina and across the country, civil rights are under attack. Trump and Republicans' so-called immigration enforcement has come in the form of mass terror. Religious and community events are being postponed. Workers are afraid to show up to their jobs. and thousands of students are missing school in fear that when they return home, their parents won't be there to meet them. Entire neighborhoods are living in constant fear as unmarked vehicles and masked agents sweep our state in hopes of sending another one of our neighbors to a warrantless detention. The resilience of our communities in standing together against these attacks on immigrants and Black and brown Americans has been moving. But legislation to support these same communities cannot wait. Trump and his Department of Homeland Security is offering cash bounties to local law enforcement for working with ICE as we speak. I myself served in local law enforcement for over 20 years, so I know firsthand that policing should protect and support our communities, not divide them. But the Trump administration's reckless move to deputize local officers into immigration enforcers does the exact opposite. It undermines public safety and sows distrust across our communities. That's why I'm proud to stand with my colleagues today in introducing the Protect Immigration Act, which would reverse ICE's 287G program to prevent local law enforcement from collaborating with federal immigration enforcement and safeguard our immigrant communities. Lives are at stake, and we cannot wait to pass laws that protect our communities from the abuses of Trump's authoritarian rule. So I now turn it over to Representative Quigley.
I'd like to proud to introduce Noreen Shaw, Director of Policy of Government Affairs for the ACLU.
Thank you so much, Congressman, and thank you so much to all the members of Congress speaking this morning, Congresswoman Jayapal, McBride, and Foushee. We're so grateful to you for introducing this critical bill, the Protect Immigration Act, that would make sure that law enforcement, local law enforcement, stays focused on local public safety matters, not enforcing immigration law, not tearing immigrant families apart. In just 1 year, ICE's 287G program has grown massively, from around 140 state and local agencies to more than 1,200. When Congress provided the authority for the 287G program decades ago, it never envisioned that the 287G program would be used to terrify students on a college campus when their campus police joined, to enlist fishing and wildlife and conservation agencies in tracking people down and handing them over to ICE. Congress never intended what this administration has done with this program. For years, the ACLU has fought this program as it spread across the nation. We have documented the harmful impact of it as communities across the country have been torn by the fear of racial profiling, the fear that going to Walmart to pick up some milk or dropping your child at school could lead to a traffic stop, a checkpoint where you could be torn apart from your family and your community and your home. Make no mistake, the 287G program is putting our communities at risk. Just last month in Florida, we saw it. A 287G agreement between state agencies and ICE allowed the Florida Highway Patrol to stop a bus full of workers, agricultural workers. Everyone on board was asked to essentially show their papers. The children of these workers came, and other family members came too, to provide documentation for their parents. Those U.S. citizen children were assaulted, and they were arrested. We know this is what will happen all over the country as the 287G program unfolds. The Trump administration wants to change our nation, our democracy, into a show-me-your-papers nation, where children must be afraid that when their parents go to work, they may have to show up and prove that their parents can stay here. And they may face arrest and assault if they show up for their parents. What we saw in Florida was not an isolated incident, and it underscores the urgency behind the Protect Immigration Act. Across our country, we are seeing people fight back. In Maine, in Delaware, in Oregon, in Illinois, people standing up for their communities and demanding that local law enforcement protect us rather than protect the mass deportation squads. That is why I'm proud to stand alongside these members of Congress as the ACLU continues to fight against the 287G program. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague Naina Gupta from the American Immigration Council.
Good morning. For the past year, the Trump administration has used safety as a pretext for mass deportation, but it is, of course, mass deportation itself that makes all Americans less safe. The rapid expansion of the 287G program by over 900% under the Trump administration represents yet another way the current immigration enforcement agenda undermines public safety. When local police serve as a force multiplier for ICE, people become more afraid to report crime and less trusting of local police officers. In Tennessee, just days after immigration raids were conducted by local police as well as federal agents, a local police chief posted that a non-citizen caretaker was so scared to call 911, worried that the call would result in her indefinite detention or deportation, that a baby in her care died. At the American Immigration Council, we are hearing right now from law enforcement leaders around the country who are concerned with decreased reporting of crime and an erosion of trust given the Trump administration's efforts to pressure local sheriffs into this program. Under 287G, local law enforcement agencies are also put in the position of deprioritizing real public safety concerns for their communities, diverting limited law enforcement manpower to enforce federal immigration law. Local police don't make their communities safer when they turn routine traffic stops into detention and deportation for long-standing community members who pose no safety threat. And they lose trust and credibility with those that they seek to protect. The Protect Immigration Act does take an overdue step of repealing a program that is unnecessary for effective enforcement of immigration law. The federal government has a variety of ways of working with state and local agencies when it comes to enforcing our laws, but this is a program that is bad from every angle and has had a long track record of error. It is bad for immigrant communities, bad for U.S. citizen communities of color, bad for law enforcement credibility, and especially bad for Americans' public safety. At the Council, we are grateful to the members of Congress who are committed to dismantling this program going forward. Thank you so much.
Questions?
Hi, Rebecca Santan from the Associated Press. Can you tell me, there have been hundreds of agencies, law enforcement across the country that have actually signed up over this year for the program. So I know you guys have a lot of concerns about it, but why do you think so many agencies have signed up for it?
Well, one of the reasons is because the Trump administration is trying to threaten state and local governments with funding, withholding of funding. That is not appropriate. It has not been ruled in line in the past, but that is what they're doing. So I know that a lot of our state and local governments are worried about their JAG grants, about different ways that the administration is going to withhold funding. In fact, today on a very different topic, we're debating in Judiciary Committee another bill that would withhold funding for local police if those local jurisdictions don't follow what the Trump administration wants to do. So I think that's a big part of it, and it just makes everyone less safe.
And I would say in Chicago, it's real. I mean, the president has publicly threatened Chicago and the state of Illinois that if they don't cooperate to the degree that the Trump administration believes is appropriate, they will cut off funding. And we've seen cuts and threats and slowdowns in funding for a variety of programs. So the perception among Chicago's population and its elected officials is it's not a threat, it's real.
And I'll just say one more thing. There is really, both the ACLU and the American Immigration Council mentioned this, but there's a lot of data that shows, and it's why there's been a strong local state law enforcement coalition that's always pushed back against this program, because there's a lot of data that shows that people don't report crime at the local level if they feel like this is going to be tied up. So this long-standing division between the enforcement of federal immigration law and local law enforcement has been there for a reason, because it keeps communities, all communities, safer.
Yes. Bill Malugin with Fox News. What about the other side of the coin when there is no cooperation? Look what happened to Lake Riley. Her killer was arrested by NYPD, was never handed over to ICE. She ended up dead. If local and state police want to work with ICE, why shouldn't they be able to?
Well, the first thing to just keep in mind is that state and local agencies have very many ways of working with federal agencies when there are actual public safety threats. 287G is a program that's not necessary for collaboration when there are those kind of safety threats. In the instance of Lake and Riley, even if that had been a jurisdiction with 287G, that wouldn't have changed the facts in that situation. This is an example of how this administration is preying upon American fears of safety, the true empathy folks feel for Lake and Riley and her family, to suggest that misguided policies and programs that actually make folks less safe are the answer here. When there are people who pose a real public safety threat, state and local law enforcement agencies have a range of tools at their disposal to respond to those threats. And in that instance, those tools were available to them. They are able to pick up the phone and call federal immigration enforcement agencies. They don't need 287G, which has all of these other harmful consequences for U.S. citizens and immigrants who pose absolutely no safety threat, to do their job and protect safety.
Sure, but if...
All right, what you're listening